There's a certain kind of peace that comes from having one corner of the world that's truly yours, a place where the noise of the outside just melts away. For me, that place was my garage, my workshop, my escape, my sanctuary from every ridiculous HOA rule ever invented. But all it took was one woman to shatter that peace. Veronica Thorne, the self-crowned queen of Crestview Heights, who decided that the rules she enforced didn't apply to her, but only to everyone else. And when I say she crossed a line, I mean she didn't just cross it. She took a bulldozer to it and buried it under a mountain of entitlement. And that was the moment something in me snapped. That was the moment I decided she was about to receive two surprises she would never, ever forget. Before we jump into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever had a crazy HOA moment, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. I didn't always think of my garage as a battlefield for a long time. It was just the best part of the house. I'm Elliot, a middle-aged guy, pretty simple. Give me a sturdy workbench, a decent set of tools, a cold fridge, and the rhythmic sound of a lathe humming in the corner, and I'm happy. The garage was where I went when the world felt too loud. No HOA emails, no passive-aggressive flyers, no urgent community updates, just me, a half-finished project, and the beautiful, deep green paint of my '72 Mustang, which, by the way, was always parked perfectly inside, out of sight, and meticulously maintained. That car was the subject of our conflict, the central point of contention, because Veronica hated it. Veronica, she became president of the HOA through one of those sad little meetings where 5 people show up, 3 vote, and suddenly one person has power over everyone's architectural aesthetic. For Veronica, this meant everything had to be modern, minimalist, and beige. And my classic Mustang, my pride and joy, with its muscular lines and deep color, was apparently an industrial eyesore that violated the non-existent pre-2000s vehicle visibility clause. From that day on, it was like someone handed a hall monitor a badge and a copy of the Magna Carta. She didn't just take the role seriously, she treated it like a mission to transform our quiet street into her personal, sanitized kingdom. She patrolled the street like she owned the pavement, clipboard in hand, always wearing those stiff HOA-branded vests, lips pursed, eyes scanning for violations, trash cans an inch too close to the curb, garden hoses not coiled neatly enough, a lawn chair left out overnight. We used to joke that if your grass grew a millimeter too tall, you'd get a violation notice with a high-resolution photo attached. And the joke stopped when the letters started arriving, not just for me, but for the Johnsons across the street because their kids drew chalk on the driveway, or the older gentleman down the road who was threatened with a fine because the paint on his mailbox was deemed too glossy. She loved the rules, but she loved the power even more. Now I'm not anti-rule. I mow my lawn. I edge the sidewalk. I keep my property immaculate. I pay my dues on time, and I mind my own business. I'm the guy who volunteers to help fix the community fence. But with Veronica, it didn't matter how reasonable you were. What mattered was that she could tell you what to do. Push back even a little, and she magically found a new, obscure rule you'd never heard of, or she'd raise the fine on your existing violation by another $100 just for good measure. The first time she really got under my skin, it was over the Mustang. I received a $500 fine because, according to her citation, my garage door was periodically left open, exposing a non-compliant vehicle to community view, which was her way of saying she looked up the registration for my car and found some loophole to attack it. I decided to fight it, of course, because $500 for a car kept inside a closed garage is just absurd. So I showed up to the next HOA board meeting, all prepared with my documentation, my photos of the car inside the garage, and my copies of the actual bylaws. I stood up, presenting my case clearly, logically, explaining how the car was stored, how the door was closed except when actively driving, and how her fine was based on a subjective, unwritten policy. The 3 other board members, all nervous associates of Veronica, shifted uncomfortably in their plastic chairs, and Veronica just looked down at me from her little podium, adjusting her glasses with that condescending, tight little smile, and she said, in that sharp, official tone, "Mr. Thorne, your points have been noted, but the board finds the existence of the non-compliant vehicle a continued drain on the community's aesthetic value, and the fine stands. Motion approved." Then she hammered the gavel down, bang, just like that, without even consulting the other members, dismissing me like I was a pesky mosquito at her garden party. I walked out of that meeting not angry, but defeated, because I realized the rules didn't matter, justice didn't matter, only her authority did, and the garage, my sanctuary, was now just another place she could find me over. The invasion had begun, and it kept escalating. The petty fines for tiny things piled up. The passive-aggressive notes on my mailbox became almost daily. She was squeezing me out, using bureaucracy as a weapon. And then, the final, unforgivable act. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a perfect sunny day, so I pulled the Mustang out for an hour-long cruise just to clear my head after getting yet another ridiculous citation about the approved shade of my mailbox number font. I came back feeling marginally better, hit the remote, and watched the garage door glide up, expecting to see my clean concrete floor and my well-organized tool chests. Instead, my feet slammed on the brakes so hard my truck shuddered. The entire front half of my garage, the designated space where the Mustang belonged, was filled with a colossal, dark, steaming pile of landscaping mulch. It was dirt brown, freshly delivered, and spread out across my floor like a giant, filthy welcome mat, almost reaching my workbench. It smelled wet and earthy, and it was absolutely massive. I got out of my truck slowly, staring at the sheer audacity of it, and then I heard a voice, sharp and smug, from behind me. "Oh, Elliot, sorry about that. Just temporary emergency storage. The delivery truck was early. You know how it is." Veronica stood there, wearing her stiff vest, clipboard in hand, looking entirely too satisfied with herself. "Emergency storage," I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. "In my private, locked garage. You just dumped a ton of landscaping mulch on my property?" She gave me that thin-lipped look, like she'd just bitten into something sour, but this time with a wicked gleam in her eye. "It was empty, Elliot, and the materials needed to be secured overnight for the Common Area Project, Section 4. B.2 of the bylaws allows for the president to commandeer necessary storage space for the benefit of the community," she said, quoting a section I knew she had just invented. "We'll clear it out tomorrow, just be mindful." Mindful, that word, that condescending, patronizing word, just be mindful. She didn't just cross the line. She drove right over it, straight into my workshop, straight into my peace, straight into my last sanctuary, and the moment I saw that massive, stinking pile of mulch sitting on my perfect, clean concrete floor, that's when the switch flipped. I looked at her smirk, I looked at the mulch, and I looked down at my hands, the hands that built things, fixed things, solved problems with precision and effort. I smiled, a slow, genuine smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Don't worry about it, Veronica," I said, and the calmness in my voice must have surprised her. "I'll keep it secure for you. Absolutely. I'll even make sure it stays put, very secure." She blinked, confused, then shrugged and walked off, scribbling on her clipboard, convinced she had won the final round, convinced she had finally broken me. "Oh, Veronica, you had no idea who you were dealing with. You brought your battlefield to my workshop, and now you were going to experience what a man with a toolbox, a wiring schematic, and zero remaining patience can accomplish." I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to call the police. I was going to fix this the way a man fixes a boundary problem. Clean, simple, and with a beautiful, satisfying sense of poetic justice. First, I drove my Mustang to my friend Dave's house a few blocks over, safe and sound. Then I went to work on the mulch. You wanted me to keep it secure? Fine. I spent the next 3 hours spreading the entire, vast, dirty pile of mulch, not just in a heap, but meticulously spread across the front half of the garage floor, right against the door track, a massive, dense carpet of damp earth. Then, just to ensure maximum weight and inconvenience, I hit it with the garden hose, soaking it until it was heavy, compacted, and as immovable as a newborn mountain. Surprise number one. A mulch-based blockade you couldn't possibly shift with just a shovel. But that wasn't enough. The real beauty came next. I wheeled out the industrial-grade, motion-activated dye sprayer system I'd rigged up years ago for a complicated painting project. It was a custom rig, 2 nozzles hidden behind a beam, wired to a low-voltage sensor. It was designed to coat any intruder. Now, I didn't want to hurt her, so I emptied the paint and filled the tanks with something better, non-toxic, highly pigmented, bright blue landscaping dye. the kind used to mark trees or sports fields, the kind that stains fabric and skin for days, especially when sprayed with industrial force. It looked harmless, just a couple of nozzles hidden away, but I knew what it could do. I then went to work on the door itself. I disabled the main exterior keypad switch and rerouted the power to a secondary, hidden sensor, which was positioned low, right where a key fob or a hand would hover if someone was trying to use an unauthorized access point. I also knew Veronica had a universal HOA access key fob that was supposed to only open utility boxes, but which I suspected she'd cloned to open almost anything. If she tried that fob, or tried to manually tamper with the door's internal lock, she'd hit the sensor. The trap was set. The blockade was ready. Surprise number 2 was waiting in the wings. I locked the interior door, sat down in my living room, cracked open a drink, and waited, because I knew Veronica wouldn't be able to resist. She wanted that mulch back for her project, and she wouldn't ask nicely. She would just assume she could use her stolen authority to retrieve it. The wait wasn't long. The next afternoon, I saw her HOA-branded SUV pull up outside. She hopped out with her stiff walk, followed by a very nervous, junior HOA committee member, a young guy named Mark, who always looked like he was regretting every life choice that led him to that job. Veronica marched straight up to my garage door, clipboard in hand, and hit the exterior keypad with her universal code. Nothing happened. She frowned, hit it again, then again, getting visibly frustrated. Ugh, the electronics are failing again. Honestly, Elliot's house is a constant maintenance headache. I heard her mumble through the window. Even though the door wasn't broken, it was just disabled. That's when she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small, metallic fob, the universal access fob, and she raised it to the door, aiming for the internal lock mechanism. The moment she tried to bypass the security, the entire world went from silent to chaotic in a single second. WHRRPSHHH. The industrial sprayers hidden behind the beam exploded to life. 2 powerful jets of bright, luminous, electric blue dye slammed into Veronica and poor Mark, coating them instantly. The dye hit her HOA vest, her perfectly coiffed hair, her face, her clipboard, turning the whole scene into a horrifying, blue-tinged cartoon. Veronica let out a shriek that could shatter glass. What in the HHH? Mark just froze, wide-eyed, his white shirt instantly turning neon blue. They stood there, soaked, dripping the most unnatural shade of blue I have ever seen, completely paralyzed in a moment of utter, cinematic humiliation. Veronica tried to wipe her eyes, only smearing the blue dye further, making her look like a terrifying, power-crazed smurf. I waited 5 full seconds. Then I casually opened the interior garage door, stepping out of the shadows, looking perfectly calm, holding a simple toolbox, as if I'd just come in from a pleasant afternoon of woodworking. "Good afternoon, Veronica," I said, my voice quiet, completely devoid of triumph. "Having some trouble with your emergency storage access?" She sputtered, blue dye running down her cheeks. You psycho. What is this? You'll be sued. This is criminal vandalism," she screamed, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. I shrugged, stepping closer to the massive, damp mulch pile. "I'm just protecting my private property." "Veronica," I replied, gesturing to the system. "After you dumped your garbage here, I had to upgrade security. You were trespassing on private property while attempting to steal stored materials, and you triggered a non-toxic dye marker system. It's clearly marked in my private home insurance policy as a security enhancement." I paused, letting her eye the mulch pile. "Oh, and surprise number 2 is that giant pile of soaking wet, heavy mulch blocking the door. Good luck cleaning up the emergency storage you created." Veronica tried to take a furious step towards me, but she slipped on the wet mulch, stumbling backwards into the wall. Poor Mark, who was literally dripping blue from his hair to his shoes, suddenly did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of the blue-dyed, mulch-covered, furious Veronica, and immediately started tapping away, sending it straight to the community chat group, right to the full board. He'd finally had enough, and he'd just blown the whistle on her entire operation. The neighborhood was never the same after that. Veronica was forced to resign that week, facing a stiff fine for damaging community property, the destroyed mulch, a possible restraining order, and the eternal nickname, Smurfonica. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The tyranny was over, brought down not by bureaucracy, but by a blue dye sprayer and a man who knew how to set a truly unforgettable trap. I really thought that was the end of it. After all, Veronica had been removed, and the neighborhood had peace. But something lingered. 2 weeks later, Mark, the nervous former junior member who had been promoted to interim president, came to my garage. He wasn't wearing a vest. He wasn't carrying a clipboard. He just looked exhausted. "Elliot," he said, rubbing his temple, "I found something in Veronica's files, a note about the Mustang. It said, vehicle targeted for removal, aesthetic compliance, leverage point, utility." I asked her about the utility part when she was cleaning up the mulch. She said she wasn't even targeting the car, but the garage itself. I frowned. The garage? Why? He swallowed hard. The HOA had an unapproved, confidential contract with a big landscaping company. They needed a place to store specialized equipment, something big, quiet, out of sight for a while. Veronica was clearing your garage for them to rent it out, illegally, using the HOA's name, and pocketing the cash herself. She needed you gone so she could use your space as a secret, unauthorized storage facility. The realization hit me. She wasn't just power-hungry. She was corrupt, using the HOA presidency for personal profit, and the fines, the harassment, the mulch. It was all just cover to clear out my space. I stood there, staring at the floor, thinking about how I'd used the very material she dumped there as the centerpiece of my revenge, and how my simple fight over a classic car had accidentally uncovered a sophisticated scheme. Mark finally spoke, his voice low and serious. "You saved the neighborhood, Elliot, but you did it by technically breaking 5 bylaws with that dye system. You were extreme, arguably criminal, but you were the only person who stood up to her power with something she couldn't beat." He turned to leave, then paused at the driveway. "The new board is fine with your Mustang. Keep the door open all day if you want. But tell me honestly," he asked, turning back with a conflicted look, "did you go too far?" I looked at the clean concrete floor, at the space where the mulch had been, at the hidden nozzles of the dye system, and I looked out at the street, now quiet, peaceful, finally free of tyranny. "I just brought a proportional response to an invasion of my personal property, Mark," I said. But a part of me wondered if I had crossed my own line in the process. Did I become what I hated, just to win? The truth is, HOA drama is usually petty, annoying, frustrating, sometimes unfair, but every so often, something deeper hides underneath, something that forces you to stand up, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. What happened in our neighborhood started with a parked car and a pile of mulch, but it grew into a reminder that community only works when people protect each other, when you set boundaries, when you refuse to let corruption control your life. Now, I want to hear from you. My action was extreme, arguably illegal, but it exposed corruption and brought peace back to the street. Was my poetic justice justified, or did I go too far by rigging that dye system? Did I become the villain to stop a villain? Share your thoughts below. Tell me what you would have done. And if you want more wild HOA tales, more twists, more lessons learned the hard way, make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss what happens when Veronica inevitably tries to return.